Welcome to the Big Picture Retirement Show, where you'll learn what it really takes to have a successful retirement. With over 20 years of experience, your host, Rick Rivera of Safeguard Investment Advisory Group, has seen it all and is here to help you achieve your retirement dreams. This is the Big Picture Retirement Show.
Well, once again, you're listening to the Big Picture Retirement Show. I'm your host, Rick Rivera. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and also want to give you a quick description as to what we cover each and every week on the Big Picture Retirement Show. Basically, what we like to do is obviously give you tools and strategies that you can use to enhance what it is that you've already been able to accomplish when it comes to your retirement planning. Whether it's tax strategies, whether it's investment strategies, whether it has to do with your trust and will planning, and the list goes on and on. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do today is I want to talk about the holistic planning process. I know for a while now, each and every week, I was picking a topic and talking about one or two topics on the show. And we've got some calls and some emails, and people were saying, hey, Rick, what exactly do you mean by holistic planning, this big picture approach? So what I want to do today is try to clarify that in a little bit more detail for you on today's show. And what I mean by that is if you want to look at your retirement planning, your estate planning from this big picture holistic approach that we talk about, what I want to do is give you, it's not going to be an exhaustive list, but I'm going to give you a list of some things that you want to take into consideration as far as looking at your planning from that holistic standpoint, and the things that you need to definitely consider from the holistic standpoint. So by you listening to today's show, you'll have a better understanding of what I mean by that holistic approach and things that you should be looking at when it comes to your retirement planning. Now, if you have questions about any of the topics that we talk about on the show today, maybe you have questions outside of some of the things that I'm talking about on the show today, feel free to give us a call, toll-free, 800-700-1980. Again, our toll-free number is 800-700-1980. You can also reach us on the web at safeguardinvestment.com. Again, our website address is safeguardinvestment.com, and we have a lot of good information on the website as well. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right into it. So starting out, again, if we're going to talk about things from a holistic standpoint, obviously the one thing that stands out in most people's minds and first thing they go to is investments. Whether it's their 401ks, their savings, their SEPs, their IRAs, their KIOs, whether it's their TSP, 403Bs, 457s. So they look at the investments as the major portion of their retirement planning, which it is a very big portion of it. Don't get me wrong. And it's very important to look at the investments. However, there's more to retirement planning and the holistic approach outside of the investments. So here's what I mean by that. Is it important to make sure that the investments are running efficiently from a holistic standpoint? Absolutely. We want to make sure that we're not. So what are some of the basic things we're going to look at? Obviously, we want to make sure that the investments are on track with our individual goals and our objectives. We want to make sure that we're not taking on any unnecessary risks, that the risks that we're taking on in our investments match our comfort level. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing on the investment portion is being tax managed. So there's a lot of things, we want to make sure that our investments are truly diversified. We want to make sure that we're not overly correlated in one area, which means that, sometimes I see people that have a variety of different investments, or let's say different mutual funds or ETFs or stocks or whatever. They may have a variety of mutual funds in their 401k, different investments in their IRA, some other different investments in their Roth IRAs. And when we look at them all, they're all basically working the same way. So if I have two funds, Fund A and Fund B, and the reason why I have two funds is to be diversified, and whatever affects Fund A economically, let's say Fund A moves up 10% and Fund B moves up 10%, and then whatever affects Fund A on the negative side, now when that drops 10%, the other one drops 10%. If they're acting exactly the same, are we truly diversified? So my point is that when looking at these investments and looking in different places, so many times we'll review client situations or new people coming into our office, see they have investments in different areas. And many times, although they think they're diversified, they really aren't. And we can actually do a stress test that actually will show not only how much risk you're taking, but if you're truly diversified. In some cases, I've seen investments where they're actually working the opposite of each other. They're negatively correlated, where when one's going up one direction, the other one is going the same direction down. So one goes up 10, the other one goes down 10. When the other one goes up 10, the other one goes down 10. And if they're working the opposite of each other, now you're not making any money in between, and you still got to pay your fees in those investments. So you're actually losing money. So there's a lot of things that go into just looking at the investments and how they're working, and to make sure that they're working on all cylinders that obviously I just can't cover in 30 minutes here on the show. But outside of that now, again, looking at things from the holistic standpoint, making sure that the investments are working as efficiently as possible, and looking at all the different variables that a good advisor can sit down with you and go over. But what about the taxes? What good is it if somebody makes an investment recommendation for you and they're not reviewing your taxes, and that investment recommendation now causes your taxes to increase? So the scenario here is, if they're not looking at the taxes, whatever money you made on one hand, you could be losing on the other without even realizing it. Because when you get your statements, each quarter or every month, you go throughout the year and you might say, hey, I'm doing pretty well. But then when it comes tax time, you're giving your 1099s, your W-2s and everything to your tax preparer, and you're no longer thinking about the investments anymore. And all you know is you get a bill and you're like, okay, well, I owe this much to IRS, or out of everything that I paid last year, I'm only getting back X amount. Well, you're not correlating of, hey, what can I do to help minimize the taxes? If we can save a client 10 or 15% in taxes, how easy is it to make that same 10 or 15% in the market? Just by controlling the things that we can actually control. Because let's face it, when it comes to market investments, can any advisor guarantee you how your stocks are going to perform next year, or what interest rates are going to be next year? Or all they can do is give you their best educated guess, and obviously try to put as much odds in your favor of winning. But at the end of the day, what ties into those returns is going to make sure that those investments are working in the most tax efficient manner possible. So as part of the holistic planning, big picture approach, not only do we look at the investments, but we also want to look at the taxes as well. And I'm going to go into further detail about that and a variety of other things. But before I do that, if you're looking for a second opinion on your particular situation, your retirement planning, and you're like, listen, I want to make sure that my investments are running on all cylinders. I want to make sure that my taxes are, let's face it, at the end of the day, most of my clients tell me, hey, listen, Rick, you know what? I don't mind paying my fair share when it comes to taxes. I just don't want to be paying more than my fair share. So if you want to make sure you're not paying more than your fair share in taxes, and just make sure everything's working together, maybe you want to maximize what Social Security is going to be bringing in for you when you retire, or maybe you are already retired and you just want to make sure that you're eking out every penny out of Social Security or out of your pensions. Or maybe you're concerned about your trust and will planning, making sure that they're all working together, or a variety of other topics that we talk about on the show in each and every week. If you'd like, I'd be happy to offer you a 15-minute phone consultation where you can ask me some questions. If you'd like, I can maybe give you some tidbits on what you can do to enhance your situation. If you care to take advantage of the call, there's no cost, no obligation. I'm happy to offer it to listeners. Give us a call right now, toll free, 800-700-1980. Again, our toll free number is 800-700-1980, and you can set up that strategy call. Now, before I get into the rest of the holistic planning approach, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to cover a variety of other things that you need to be looking at from a holistic standpoint when it comes to your retirement planning. In the meantime, you have questions about any of the topics, give us a call, toll free, 800-700-1980, and I'll finish covering these topics when we come right back.
You're listening to the Big Picture Retirement Show with Rick Rivera. For more information about Rick and the Safeguard Investment Advisory Group team, go to safeguardinvestment.com. While you're there, you can also download educational retirement guides and sign up for an upcoming seminar. That's safeguardinvestment.com. Now, back to the podcast.
And we're back. You're listening to the Big Picture Retirement Show. I'm your host, Rick Rivera. If you have any questions about any of the topics I'm discussing today, give us a call, toll free, 800-700-1980. You can also reach us on our web at safeguardinvestment.com. So today, I kind of wanted to give you more of an idea of what I mean by holistic planning, that big picture approach, and how things kind of tie in together. So what we did is we talked about investments. And investments are important, obviously, but we talked about, making sure that they're running on all cylinders, running as efficiently as possible. And I talked about some of the things that we look at when it comes to investment planning. Obviously, it's not an exhaustive list, but just to kind of give you an idea. The other thing that I said is that what ties into your investment planning is going to be taxes. Because what good is it if somebody makes an investment recommendation for you and then, you lose a percentage of that return due to taxes? So it's very important that the taxes are working with the investments. What also ties into that? Well, Social Security. Folks, if you're planning for retirement, or maybe you are already retired, well, Social Security plays a big part in your overall planning. But believe it or not, Social Security is not taxed the same way as your pensions, or maybe you pulling money out of your 401ks or IRAs is taxed differently. So how can we eke out as much dollars as possible out of Social Security? Well, we do that by minimizing the actual taxes on Social Security. So again, we talk about investments, but what good is it? You could have the best investment in the world making you 10% each and every day, but what good is it if we're losing 10 or 15% of that, or 20% of that, or 30% of that to taxes? And then on top of it, that investment is now actually, the way it's structured, is actually causing your Social Security to be taxed at a higher level. So now the return that we thought we were getting is subpar after taxes and Social Security taxation, because we weren't looking at things from that big picture standpoint. So people look at things sometimes in a bubble. They just look at the investments as its own standalone little island. Hey, I'm getting X return. Great. Then they look at taxes on its separate standalone. They just give the 1099s, the W-2s to the CPA or the tax preparer, and they get a bill and call it a day, and really have no clue how the taxes are reflecting, or how onto the investments, or how the investments are reflecting into the taxes. And then when it comes to Social Security, hey, they just take it at face value. Oh, okay, well, I guess I have to pay X amount on my Social Security. So they pay it and it's taken out of the taxes, and they assume there's nothing that can be done. Because again, they're looking at it as a standalone. They're taking things for face value. And they don't realize that the investments can be structured in such a way where it can actually minimize the taxation on Social Security. So again, if we can save you 10 or 15% in taxes, save you 10 or 15% or 20% taxation on your Social Security, folks, these are all things that directly tie into the return on your investments. Because again, what good is it to make X amount over here and then we're losing that on the other side of the equation? And this is what we talk about from a holistic standpoint, making sure that everything is working in conjunction with one another. So there are strategies, there are ways in which you can actually position the investments prior to retirement. There's also strategies and ways that you can position your investments even after you're already retired, which will not only reduce the amount of taxes that you're currently paying, but also minimize the taxation on your Social Security. So it's important that you get these strategies reviewed. The other thing too is your pensions. How are you maximizing those pensions once again in your favor? Because now your pensions are definitely taxed differently than what Social Security is. And do you understand those differences? And if you don't understand those differences, are you overpaying? Now, if you want a second opinion on your big picture approach, just to make sure that you're not missing anything and you're eking out every penny out of your Social Security, your pensions, making sure the investments are working on all cylinders, making sure that you're not overpaying in taxes. If you want, be happy to offer you a strategy call Things are kind of tight. So if you're one of the first 10 callers to call the show right now, we'll offer you that strategy call, no cost, no obligation, and you can talk to me directly. Maybe you got questions outside of what I'm talking about today regarding your situation. I'll be happy to help you out or give you any pointers on how you can enhance whatever concerns you do have. If you'd like to take advantage of that strategy call, give us a call, 800-700-1980. Again, call us toll-free, 800-700-1980. You can also reach us on the web at safeguardinvestment.com. Again, if you're just tuning into the show, you're listening to the Big Picture Retirement Show. I'm your host, Rick Rivera. And again, our toll-free number is 800-700-1980. So far, what have I discussed so far in the show? I talked about investments. I talked as far as holistic planning, and there's things that need to be done in order to make sure those things are running on all cylinders and making sure they're working as efficiently as possible. We talked about taxes and how they tie into the investments. We talked about Social Security and how Social Security is taxed differently than IRAs and pensions and all the rest of it. And we need to make sure that we're running that as efficiently as possible, because depending on how the investments are positioned, can have a positive or negative impact on either the taxes and also Social Security taxation. So whatever we're making on one hand, we could totally be losing on the other and not even realizing it. We talked about pensions, that they're taxed differently than Social Security, and we need to understand those differences so that way we can make sure we're making everything work in our favor. So many people are literally, when we do analysis and whenever people call into the show and take advantage of the consultations that we offer them, so many times after we do the analysis for them and review their situation, their eyes are wide open and they're so happy they got that second opinion. Because many times we're finding out that they've been overpaying in taxes by thousands of dollars, maybe overpaying in fees on their investments by thousands of dollars per year. Now you combine the two, potentially some people, depending on the size of their estate, now you're talking about saving $10,000, $15,000 a year between taxes and fees. You know, when everything starts adding up, you add up what the investments are, you add up the savings on the taxes, you add up the savings on Social Security, the savings on the pension, and all of a sudden we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. For some people, it may be thousands. For some people, it's tens of thousands. So it's very important to get these things reviewed. Well, in sticking with the theme of holistic planning, again, if you're just tuning into the show, you're listening to the Big Picture Retirement Show. We're talking about holistic planning when it comes to your retirement. If you have a question about any of the topics, give us a call, toll-free, 800-700-1980. Again, our toll-free number is 800-700-1980. You're listening to the Big Picture Retirement Show. I'm your host, Rick Rivera. Now, what else ties into that holistic planning approach? Again, I talked about investments, taxes, Social Security, pensions. What about your trust and will planning? What about your power of attorneys? You know, let's say you got the best investment in the world. Your taxes are all straightened out. You're maximizing that as much as possible. You're maximizing your Social Security. You're maximizing your pensions. Everything's all good on that end. God forbid you or your spouse get ill, get sick, you're in the hospital. You got the best investment in the world. But now your spouse needs access to your 401k because they need $5,000 to cover some medical bills or cover some bills or whatever. They need to do some sort of planning or whatever. Well, guess what? You don't own your 401k jointly with your spouse. Your IRA, your SEPs, your TSP, your 403b, your 457s, your KIOs. You don't own that, your Roths. You don't own that jointly with your spouse. So now your spouse calls up the brokerage firm or the institution where the money's at and says, hey, listen, I need $5,000 out of my, spouse's IRA or 401k or whatever the investment is. The institution is going to say, great. Can you put your spouse on the line? You're going to say, well, that's the reason why I need the $5,000 because my spouse is in the hospital. There was an accident and I need to cover some bills. They're going to say, I'm sorry. Do you have what's called a power of attorney? If you don't have that document, guess what? You don't have access to that account. You don't own it jointly with your spouse. Now, obviously, a common response back to the broker is, well, what are you talking about? I'm primary beneficiary on this account. Why can't I access it? Well, because your spouse didn't die. Your spouse is in the hospital. The beneficiary only works when the spouse passes away. While you're alive, you need a power of attorney. So now we got the investments all set up perfectly, got the tax, everything's working smoothly, but now you can't access the investments. So what good is that? Again, because we didn't look at things from that holistic approach. So there's so many things that tie into it that this is where a good advisor can help you look at your overall situation and let you know, hey, listen, you know what? Here are all the areas where you're actually doing really well. There might be only one or two areas that you can enhance, but these enhancements could make a dramatic difference. Last thing you want you to do in an emergency situation, find out that you can't access the investments, or God forbid your kids can't make medical decisions for you. And what about long-term care planning? As we get older, part of the estate planning, one of the biggest things that causes people to go into poverty is medical costs. As we get older, those costs become more and more expensive. And for many people, they don't want to be a burden on their children. So what about your long-term care planning options? And the list goes on and on and on. And again, I'm sorry, folks, but with the timing of the show, I can't give you an exhaustive list in one show, but I just wanted to give you some ideas as to all the things that tie into the holistic planning approach. Again, we talked about taxes. We talked about investments. We talked about Social Security. We talked about pensions, trust and will planning, power of attorneys, long-term care. And I can even add more to that list. But here's the thing. If you want, what I will do for you today, if you want to have your situation reviewed, I'll be happy to do it for you. I'll be happy to review it and let you know, hey, here's a couple of areas where you might be able to enhance. If I review everything and all of a sudden we find out, hey, listen, everything you have is working perfectly, well, then at least you can take a deep breath and realize, hey, you know what? Everything is great. You go to the doctor, he gives you an opinion. Sometimes you go to another doctor just to get a second opinion. If you want that second opinion, give us a call right now. I'll be happy to do it for you personally. Call me right now, toll free, 800-700-1980. Again, that toll free number is 800-700-1980. You can also reach us on the web at safeguardinvestment.com. Again, that website address is safeguardinvestment.com. You are listening to the Big Picture Retirement Show. I'm your host, Rick Rivera. I want to thank all of you for tuning in today. And once again, if you care to take advantage of that consultation, I'll be happy to review this with you. Just give us a call, toll free, 800-700-1980, and I'll share some ideas on what you can do in order to maximize your situation and give you specifics regarding your own personal situation when it comes to your holistic planning. I hope today was a big help to everyone. With that being said, I look forward to talking to all of you next week. Have a great weekend.
Firm offers insurance services. Safeguard Investment Advisory Group, LLC is a registered investment advisory firm. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Safeguard Investment Advisory Group, LLC is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Safeguard Investment Advisory Group, LLC. This radio show is a paid placement.